The valley was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that felt like it could stretch forever. Mist curled over the soft green grass, and the gentle sunlight began to peek through the clouds, painting the hills in soft gold. She walked barefoot across the cool earth, her heart full of the tender excitement that never faded, no matter how many times she had experienced it before. Today, like every other day, she would care for her dragon hatchlings, her little companions who had grown under her careful watch. Their eggs had hatched only a few weeks ago, yet already they had begun to show their unique personalities, each one surprising her in ways she hadn't expected. She knelt by the largest nest first, her fingers brushing over the tiny, shimmering scales of a hatchling who was nuzzling against her hand. It had a soft, almost golden green hue, and its eyes were wide and trusting. She smiled, feeling the familiar warmth of connection that ran through her chest whenever she touched them. "Good morning," she whispered softly, her voice just loud enough for the little creature to hear. The hatchling blinked and let out a small, happy chirp, curling closer into her palm. She laughed quietly. Even these small moments, simple as they were, filled her with joy. It was a love she had never imagined she could feel, not for humans, not for anything else in the world. Only for these tiny dragons did her heart swell so completely. The other hatchlings stirred as she moved to the next nest, their tiny wings twitching, claws scraping lightly against the soft earth. Some were playful, nudging each other and rolling around, while others were more cautious, keeping close to the warmth of the nest and to her presence. She knew each one by sight, by sound, by the subtle way they moved. There was one with scales, the color of deep night, almost black, who preferred to hide behind the others and watch quietly. Another was fiery red, always eager to explore and to challenge the world around it. Even the quiet one, she thought, had its own way of showing affection, its trust growing a little more each day. Watching them was like watching a small universe come to life, each creature a shining star in the sky of her life. As she tended to them, feeding them the small bits of food she had carefully prepared, her thoughts wandered. She knew that this peaceful morning could not last forever. Something had been stirring in her dreams, a strange unease that she could not shake. It had begun as a whisper of warning, a shadow of feeling that something bad might happen. She pushed it away at first, not wanting to spoil the happiness of the day, but the feeling lingered, settling in the pit of her stomach like a stone. She tried to focus on the warmth of the sun, on the soft chirping and the gentle rustle of wings, on the tiny noses nudging her hand. But even so, a small part of her mind remained alert, quietly scanning for anything unusual. Still, she chose to let herself enjoy the moment. She moved from nest to nest, speaking softly, stroking scales, and humming little tunes that she had invented over the days. A dragon seemed to respond, curling closer to her when she hummed, and blinking sleepily when she ran her fingers along their tiny backs. It was a simple bond, yet unbreakable. She knew that they relied on her completely, that they would look to her for comfort and protection in ways that went beyond words. And she, in turn, relied on them for a kind of love that was raw, pure, and unshakable. The valley could be harsh. The world outside could be unforgiving. But here, in these moments, she felt a peace she could not find anywhere else. By midday, the sun had climbed higher, casting a warm glow across the valley. She gathered the hatchlings together, letting them play around her while she kept the watchful eye. One by one, they began to explore, their wings flapping clumsily as they tested their strength, their tiny claws leaving marks on the soft earth. She laughed at their antics, reaching out to catch the fiery red one before it tumbled too far, and pulling the black one gently out of the shadows. Each movement was careful, gentle, and filled with love. She could see their personalities shining clearly: bravery, curiosity, caution, mischief, and affection. Each hatchling was a separate being, yet together they formed a family, and she was the center of it, the thread that bound them all. Even with the joy and warmth around her, that quiet unease never fully left her. She paused for a moment, sitting on a moss-covered rock, the hatchlings crawling over her lap and shoulders. Her eyes scanned the horizon, looking at the hills and trees and the distant mountains that bordered the valley. Everything seemed calm, but her heart whispered that calm could be fragile. She had lived in the valley long enough to know that nature was unpredictable, and creatures, even magical ones like her dragons, were vulnerable. Still, she chose not to dwell on it, not yet. There was enough time to prepare later. For now, she wanted to be with them fully, to enjoy the small moments that could never be recreated. As the afternoon unfolded, she noticed the way the sun glinted off their scales, how their tiny wings shimmered in the light, and how their little chirps and coos seemed to harmonize with the wind and the rustling leaves. She sang softly, a melody that had no name, a tune she had made up over the days she had cared for them. The dragons paused, turning their heads toward her, listening, their eyes wide and trusting. Even the shy black one edged closer, resting its tiny head on her knee. She continued singing, letting the music fill the valley, letting it wrap around the creatures she loved so dearly. It was her way of expressing the depth of her feelings, something that words could never fully capture. And in their eyes, she could see understanding, a silent connection that needed no explanation. Evening approached, and the golden light faded into soft pinks and purples, painting the sky with colors that seemed almost magical. She gathered the hatchlings into their nests again, carefully tucking each one in, stroking their tiny heads, and whispering words of comfort. The feeling of love that surged through her was almost overwhelming. She knew that the world outside the valley could be cruel, that the dragon's innocence was fragile, but here, in her arms, they were safe. She stayed with them until the stars began to appear, their tiny bodies nestled close to one another, their eyes slowly closing as sleep overtook them. Finally, she sat back, letting a deep sigh escape her lips. The hatchlings were asleep, the valley was quiet, and the sky was a canvas of stars. She allowed herself a moment to reflect, to breathe, to feel the love and responsibility that filled her heart. She knew that this was only the beginning, that many challenges lay ahead, that the dragons would grow and the world would test them. But tonight, at least they were safe, and they were together, and that was enough. For the first time in their day, she allowed herself to feel completely at peace, even with that shadow of unease still lingering somewhere in the back of her mind. It was a small, quiet joy, but one that would carry her through whatever came next. As she stood to leave the nests, stretching her tired limbs and brushing the dirt from her clothes, she looked once more at her tiny companions. Their little chests rose and fell with the rhythm of sleep, their soft scales glinting faintly in the starlight. She whispered again, a soft promise she knew they could not understand in words, but could feel in their hearts. I will always protect you. Always. And with that, she stepped back into the shadows of the trees, leaving the valley quiet and peaceful, at least for now, knowing that tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, and the same unbreakable bond that tied her to the creatures she loved more than life itself. The morning came with a strange stillness in the air. The sun rose slowly over the valley, casting a pale light on the dew-covered grass. She felt it immediately, a quiet tension that seemed to hum in the air around her. The hatchlings were awake, chirping softly, stretching their tiny wings, and nudging each other in play. But she noticed something in their movements, a subtle hesitation, a flicker of unease that mirrored her own. It was as if they, too, could sense that the day was different, that something was coming. She moved among them carefully, brushing her hand over each tiny body, murmuring words of comfort. The soft golden-green hatchling pressed against her palm, and she could feel its small heartbeat, steady but quick. She smiled softly, though her chest felt tight. "It's okay," she whispered. "Everything will be okay." Yet even as she said the words, she could not shake the feeling that the calm of the valley was fragile. By mid-morning, the signs became clearer. Smoke curled in the distance, thin and gray, rising from the edge of the forest that bordered the valley. It was faint at first, almost like a trick of the light, but it grew steadily, a quiet warning that stirred a pang of fear in her heart. She watched it carefully, squinting toward the horizon, and her mind raced through possibilities. Perhaps it was a small fire, or maybe the wind had carried dust from a distant mountain. Yet deep down, she knew it was something more serious. The hatchlings were oblivious at first, their attention caught by small insects crawling on the ground and leaves fluttering in the gentle breeze. She crouched among them, gathering the fiery red one into her arms as it tried to chase a glimmering butterfly, and the night black one tucked close to her side. She whispered soft reassurances, stroking their scales and murmuring gentle words, even though her own heart was quickening with worry. She could not let fear show to them. They relied on her for calm, for protection, and for the certainty that no matter what happened, they were safe in her care. As the morning turned to noon, the smoke became more pronounced, and with it came the distant sound of chaos. Not loud, not dangerous yet, but enough to disturb the peaceful rhythm of the valley, a rustle of hurried wings, the soft calls of birds moving away from the disturbance. She stood on the ridge overlooking the valley, holding the largest hatchling close, feeling its warmth against her chest. Her eyes scanned the smoke, noting its direction and thickness. The wind carried it closer, and with it came a realization that the valley might not remain untouched. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice as she spoke to herself. "I can protect them," she said firmly. "I must protect them." Her mind shifted into action. She led the hatchlings to a small grove of trees nearby, a place she had prepared for moments like this. It was secluded, sheltered, and hidden from view from the valley entrance. The branches formed a soft canopy, and the earth beneath was dry but soft, perfect for them to hide safely. She gathered them together, keeping the golden green and fiery red ones near her, while softly encouraging the shy black one out from the shadows. Their little claws scraped the ground as they followed her, and their tiny wings beat nervously against her arms. She spoke to each of them, using a gentle, steady tone. "We're safe here. Stay close to me, and nothing will hurt you." Even as she led them, her mind worked through every possible scenario. Could the fire reach them? Could they survive if it did? Could the hatchlings fly well enough to escape danger on their own? Each question made her chest tighten, but she did not allow panic to take over. Instead, she focused on what she could do, what she had always done: care, protect, and guide. She checked each nest she passed, making sure no hatchling was left behind, and adjusted the position of the ones in her arms, ensuring they were secure. She hummed softly, a tune she had used countless times before, letting it wrap around them like a blanket of calm. By mid-afternoon, the wind shifted, carrying the smoke more clearly into the valley. The sky, once soft and golden, now held streaks of gray. Shadows stretched longer across the ground, and the usual sounds of the valley, the chirping of birds, the rustle of small animals, had grown quieter, as if the entire world was holding its breath. She felt a shiver run down her spine, but did not let it show. The hatchlings huddled close, sensing her tension, even as they trusted her implicitly. She crouched among them again, stroking tiny heads and whispering softly, "We are together. That is what matters. Together we are strong." She knew she had to plan further. There were small caves nearby, hidden in the rocky hillside, which she had explored in her solitary walks. If the smoke and heat became too much, she would lead the hatchlings there. She had learned the land well, every nook and shadow, every hidden pathway. The valley had been her home for years, and every part of it held memories and knowledge she could use to keep them safe. Her eyes scanned the paths, her mind calculating distances, timings, and safest routes. Even in fear, she moved with calm precision, letting the hatchlings sense her certainty rather than her worry. By late afternoon, the smoke had grown heavier, curling around the edges of the valley and casting a gray haze over the landscape. She led the hatchlings toward the small caves, her arms full of the smaller ones, her back carrying a few of the heavier ones as they stumbled with nervous energy. Their wings beat lightly against her arms, their claws grasping gently for support. She spoke continuously, words of comfort and guidance, stories of times when they had overcome little challenges, songs that reminded them of warmth, safety, and her love. Each word was a shield, each gesture a promise that they would not be left alone. When she finally reached the caves, the hatchlings were weary but attentive, their tiny bodies pressed close to her as they explored their temporary shelter. She set them down carefully, allowing them to feel the rough texture of the stones beneath their claws and the cool shade of the rocks above. She brushed her fingers over their scales once more, whispering soft encouragements. "We are safe here for now. Rest, little ones. Rest and gather your strength." She could see the relief in their eyes, the way they relaxed their tiny wings and tails, curling together as they tried to find comfort in each other and in her presence. She remained with them, keeping watch over the entrance to the cave, her ears attuned to the slightest change in wind, to the faintest crackle of movement in the distance. She thought of what had brought the smoke here, wildfire, wind, or some distant cause, but she did not dwell too long on questions she could not answer. Instead, she focused on what mattered, the hatchlings, their safety, and the calm that she could provide. She sang to them again, her voice soft and low, carrying through the cave and wrapping around them like a protective veil. Even the shyest black hatchling pressed close, curling into her arms, feeling the security and warmth that only she could give as night approached. The sky darkened with a mixture of stars and lingering smoke. The valley, once a place of serene beauty, now held a tension that could be felt in every rustle of leaves, every shifting shadow. Yet in the cave, with her arms wrapped around the hatchlings and her voice filling the space, there was peace. She did not allow the fear to overtake her. She focused on the breathing of the dragons, on the rhythm of their tiny hearts, on the trust that shone in their wide, trusting eyes. She reminded herself that her strength was their strength, that her calm was their anchor. Hours passed as the night grew deeper. She kept watch, shifting occasionally to adjust the hatchlings, to hum softly, and to ensure that they remained close. The smoke lingered outside, and the distant signs of disturbance could still be sensed in the wind. But inside the cave, there was safety, warmth, and love. She allowed herself to imagine brighter mornings ahead, when the valley would be calm again, when the hatchlings could explore freely and play without fear. Even amidst the tension and uncertainty, she held on to hope, the hope that love, care, and courage could protect them from whatever was coming. By the time the first hints of dawn appeared, the hatchlings were sleeping, their tiny bodies curled close, and the cave was filled with the soft sounds of breathing and contentment. She watched over them silently, feeling the weight of responsibility and the depth of her affection. The valley outside might be dangerous, unpredictable, and full of challenges. But here, in this quiet cave, there was a bond that nothing could break. She had faced the beginning of the threat, and she had protected them. The rest, she knew, would come in time, but for now, the hatchlings were safe, and that was all that mattered. She settled among them, letting her own exhaustion take hold, but never fully letting go of the watchful care she offered. She whispered a promise she knew they could feel, if not fully understand. We will face everything together. You will never be alone. And as sleep finally claimed her, she held each hatchling close, a shield of warmth and love, ready for whatever challenges tomorrow would bring. The first light of dawn crept slowly into the cave, painting the walls with pale gold and soft shadows. She stirred quietly among the hatchlings, feeling the warmth of their tiny bodies pressed against her. Even as she moved gently, she could feel the unease that had been creeping through her heart for days growing stronger. The valley outside was no longer calm. The smoke from the previous day had thickened, and now there was a distant rumble in the wind that whispered of change she could not stop. She glanced at the hatchlings, their eyes half closed in sleep, and her chest tightened. They were so small, so innocent, so unaware of the danger lurking beyond their hidden shelter. She rose carefully, making sure not to disturb them, and moved to the cave's entrance. The view of the valley made her pause. The sunlight that usually bathed the hills in gold was muted, hidden behind a gray haze that hung low over the trees. Here and there, she could see streaks of ash drifting lazily on the wind, and she realized with a sinking feeling that the situation was worsening. Her mind raced. There was no time to waste. Whatever was coming would reach them soon, and she could not rely on luck alone to protect the hatchlings. Every decision now had to be careful, precise, and filled with love, because her little companions depended on her entirely. Returning to the hatchlings, she gathered them close, holding each one in her arms as she whispered softly. The golden-green hatchling rested its head against her shoulder. The fiery red one wriggled gently, and the night-black one pressed itself close, as if seeking comfort she could give. She spoke to them not just to calm them, but also to remind herself of the bond that tied them together. "We will face this together," she said, her voice steady, though her heart thumped fast. "We are a family. I will not let anything happen to you." The hatchlings chirped softly, their tiny sounds blending into a rhythm that seemed almost like a heartbeat, a promise that they trusted her completely. She spent the morning preparing. There was no time for hesitation. She organized the hatchlings carefully, making sure the strongest and most confident ones could support the smaller, weaker ones if needed. She had learned quickly how to read them, the way their wings fluttered, the small changes in their breathing, the subtle movements of their claws. She knew that in the moments to come, every detail mattered. She spoke to each hatchling in soft tones, recounting the small lessons she had taught them, how to flap their wings just right, how to hide in shadows, how to find comfort in each other when the world seemed uncertain. Every word was a reminder of love and care, of security, of hope. By midday, the valley beyond the cave had changed further. The smoke had thickened into a dull haze, and the sound of distant winds carried an unfamiliar intensity. She watched carefully, noting every shift in the light, every flicker of movement among the trees. Her chest ached as she realized that they could not stay here indefinitely. The cave offered shelter, yes, but it could not protect them from everything. She had to prepare them for the next stage. She had to teach them courage, to instill a sense of trust that even in the face of uncertainty, they were not alone. She looked at their tiny faces, their wide, trusting eyes, and her heart swelled with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Her mind wandered briefly to memories of their early days. The first time the golden-green hatchling had opened its eyes, the fiery red one's first attempt at flapping its wings, the night-black one curling shyly against her. Each moment had been small and beautiful, yet now each memory carried the weight of fragility. She touched their tiny heads, tracing patterns on their soft scales, and whispered softly, "You have come so far. You are strong, even if you do not know it yet." The hatchlings chirped in response, nuzzling her hands and shoulders. It was as if they understood her words in a way beyond human speech. A silent bond of love and trust that filled her heart with warmth, even amidst the growing fear. She spent hours teaching them, guiding them in small exercises that would strengthen their wings, improve their agility, and build their confidence. She encouraged the fiery red one to flap more boldly, helped the shy black one find courage to step out into the open, and held the golden green hatchling close, showing it that bravery could come from calm and love as much as from strength. Every movement, every gesture, every song she hummed was a lesson not only for them, but for herself, a way to face the truth she had been avoiding. She could not stop what was coming, but she could prepare them, and that was the best she could do. By afternoon, she noticed that the valley was darker than it had been the day before. The smoke had thickened further, curling in spirals that reminded her of restless clouds. The sun was a pale shadow, barely lighting the hills. She led the hatchlings to a deeper part of the cave, a small nook she had discovered long ago, where they could be more protected. She made sure each one was secure, adjusting their positions so that the smaller ones were sheltered by the larger, and whispered to them continuously. "We will be okay," she said. "I am here, and I will not leave you." The hatchlings responded with soft chirps and gentle nudges, as if they too were offering reassurance back to her. Sitting among them, she allowed herself a brief moment to reflect. The world outside was uncertain, dangerous even, but here, in this cave, she held the most precious beings in her life. She could feel their warmth, their trust, their dependence on her, and it was both a comfort and a weight she could not ignore. Her hands moved over their tiny bodies, stroking their scales and wings, humming melodies she had made for them, soft tunes filled with love and memories of happier days. Even as fear lingered at the edges of her mind, she clung to these moments, knowing they were fleeting but precious. As evening approached, the haze outside had thickened to the point where she could barely see the distant trees. The valley was no longer a place of light and warmth, but a shadowed world that seemed to close in around her. She knew that she could not delay the inevitable. There would come a moment when she would have to face what could not be changed. She glanced at the hatchlings, who were nestled close together, and felt a surge of fierce love and determination. She could not let fear take over, not in front of them. Her calm, her confidence, her presence, these were the shields that would protect them now. She spent the rest of the day singing to them, her soft voice echoing in the small cave, filling it with warmth and love. The hatchlings listened intently, their tiny bodies pressing closer, their eyes half closed in comfort. She recounted small stories, tales of gentle adventures they had shared, little triumphs they had accomplished. Each song, each word, was a lullaby of protection, a message of safety in a world that had grown unpredictable. Even the shy black hatchling relaxed into her arms, its tiny body vibrating softly with contentment. Night fell, and the darkness outside pressed against the cave, but inside there was a fragile peace. She sat with the hatchlings in a circle, wrapping them as closely as possible against herself, whispering softly, humming lullabies, and letting them feel her presence. She could hear the distant sounds of the valley rustling leaves, the faint cry of birds, the whisper of wind, but she let them pass without fear, focusing instead on the rhythm of their breathing, the warmth of their tiny bodies, and the bond that held them together. She repeated the same promise over and over in her mind, a mantra that strengthened her courage. "I will protect you. Always. You will never be alone." Hours passed, and sleep finally began to claim the hatchlings, their tiny wings folding gently against their bodies, their eyes closing and their breaths evening out. She stayed awake longer, keeping watch, her mind alert to every sound and every movement. She thought of what might come tomorrow, of the challenges that awaited, but she refused to let despair take hold. For now, she focused on the love that surrounded her, on the fragile trust that bound the hatchlings to her, and on the moments of quiet that allowed hope to linger. Even in the face of uncertainty, as she finally allowed her own eyes to close, resting her head near the sleeping creatures, she felt the full weight of the bond she shared with them. They were more than just hatchlings. They were a part of her life, a part of her heart, and a part of her soul. And she knew, deep in her heart, that no matter what came next, she had done everything she could to prepare them, to teach them courage, and to fill their world with love. In the quiet darkness of the cave, surrounded by the warmth of the tiny lives she had nurtured, she whispered once more, her voice soft but unwavering, "We are together. We are strong. We will face this together." The night had deepened, and the valley outside had transformed into a shadowed world of gray and black. The smoke lingered, curling in lazy spirals across the hills, and the distant sounds of the wind whispered through the trees like quiet warnings. She stayed close to the hatchlings, her body pressed against theirs, her arms wrapped tightly around them, feeling their tiny hearts beat in rhythm with her own. Every breath they took seemed like a precious gift, and every soft movement reminded her of the fragility of their lives. She had done everything she could to protect them, but deep in her heart, she knew that the world outside had grown dangerous, and there were forces beyond her control. Her mind wandered briefly to the first days after the eggs had hatched. The golden-green hatchling, with its curious eyes, had peered at the world for the very first time, while she had whispered soft encouragements. The fiery red one had flapped its tiny wings wildly, full of determination to explore, while the night-black one had curled shyly, hesitant to leave her side. Every moment had been a discovery, a learning, a bonding of trust. And now, holding them close, she realized that those early days had prepared her in ways she hadn't understood. They had taught her patience, courage, and the depth of love that one could feel for another being. No matter how small or different, she shifted slightly, ensuring that each hatchling was secure and comfortable. The golden-green one rested its head against her shoulder, its small claws lightly clutching her tunic. The fiery red one nudged her hand softly, while the night-black one pressed itself against her chest, seeking warmth and reassurance. She could feel their breathing slow as they settled in the safety of her embrace. And in that moment, she made a silent promise. No matter what happened, she would give them her all, every ounce of strength, courage, and love she had to offer. The minutes passed slowly, each one stretching longer than the last. She hummed softly, a tune she had created for them when they were first learning to recognize her voice. It was simple, gentle, and filled with warmth, a melody that spoke of love, of protection, and of hope. The hatchlings responded in kind, snuggling closer, their tiny wings curling against her body. Even the shyest black one pressed its nose into her chest, a small gesture of trust that moved her deeply. She continued humming, letting the notes wrap around them like a blanket, a shield against the growing uncertainty beyond the cave. As she sat there, memories came flooding back. She remembered the first time she had seen the golden-green hatchling struggle to open its eyes, the fiery red one stumbling as it tried to walk for the first time, and the night-black one curling nervously in the corner, unsure of the world. Each memory was a reminder of how far they had come, of how much love and care had nurtured their growth. And now, as she held them close, she understood that this moment, though heavy with fear, was also a testament to the bond they shared. They had survived together, grown together, and loved together. And that love was unbreakable, even in the face of uncertainty. The smoke outside thickened, and the wind shifted, carrying a faint, sharp scent that made her stomach tighten. She could feel the tension of the world pressing against the cave, yet she refused to let it touch her heart. She spoke to the hatchlings softly, telling them stories of the valley, of the flowers they had chased, of the streams they had touched with tiny claws. Each word was meant to comfort, to remind them of warmth and safety, to instill a sense of calm, even as the shadows pressed closer. She wanted them to know that no matter what came, they were not alone. They had each other, and they had her. Hours passed as she remained with them, humming lullabies and whispering words of reassurance. She noticed the small signs of fatigue in their tiny bodies, the slow droop of wings, the gentle rise and fall of chests, the tiny snuggles against one another. She shifted slightly, adjusting their positions, stroking their scales, and murmuring promises that were felt more than understood. Her heart ached with a mixture of sorrow and love. She knew the world outside might be harsh and unkind, but in her arms these creatures were safe. And if this was to be the last time she could hold them close, she wanted it to be filled with warmth, with love, and with the knowledge that she had given everything she had. She thought of the future she had imagined for them, the days they would soar across the valley, the moments they would chase each other through the streams, the times they would play in the sunlight without worry. And she realized that even if she could not be there for those days, her love would remain with them. It would guide them, comfort them, and remind them of the bond they shared. She allowed herself a small, trembling smile, feeling the weight of both grief and pride in equal measure. They had grown strong, and even if the world outside could not be tamed, the love she had poured into them would never fade as the night deepened further. She began to sing. It was not just a lullaby, but a song of love, of farewell, and of remembrance. Her voice was soft, almost fragile, but it carried the full depth of her emotions. She sang of the days they had shared, of the moments of joy, of the lessons learned, and of the bond that could not be broken. The hatchlings listened quietly, their tiny bodies pressed close, their eyes reflecting trust and comfort. The song was her gift to them, a final embrace, a message of love that transcended words, a promise that even in the face of loss, they were cherished beyond measure. She continued to sing for hours, her voice a constant thread of warmth and love. Her hands moved gently over the hatchlings, stroking their heads and wings, whispering soft encouragements between verses. She told them stories of courage, of discovery, and of beauty, letting each note carry the weight of her devotion. The golden green hatchling nestled against her shoulder, the fiery red one curled by her side, and the night black one pressed close to her chest. In that moment, time seemed to slow, and the world outside faded into a shadow that mattered little against the bond they shared. As the lullaby drew to a close, she held the hatchlings tighter, feeling their tiny bodies tremble softly in her embrace. Her own eyes grew heavy with tears, yet she did not let sorrow overwhelm the moment. Instead, she focused on the love that filled her heart, the trust that shone in their eyes, and the quiet peace that came from knowing she had given everything she could. She whispered once more softly, a promise she knew they could feel. "I am here. I have always been here. You are never alone." Her hands moved over their small bodies one final time, adjusting their positions, stroking their scales, and pressing them gently to her chest. The lullaby was finished, but the love remained, a living presence in the cave, wrapping around the hatchlings like an invisible shield. She could feel their tiny hearts beating against hers, a rhythm that mirrored her own, and in that rhythm she found a strange comfort. Even as the world outside pressed closer, even as the valley remained uncertain, they were together, and in that togetherness there was safety, warmth, and love. The night continued, and she stayed awake longer, her body tired but her heart alert. She whispered continuously, told small stories, hummed familiar tunes, and let her hands linger over the hatchlings, offering comfort and reassurance. She knew that she had given them all that she could, that she had filled their world with love, and that she had prepared them as best as possible for whatever the future held. And as the first light of dawn began to touch the edges of the cave, she finally allowed herself to close her eyes, holding the hatchlings close, feeling their warmth, and knowing that in this moment they were safe, loved, and cherished. Even as sleep claimed her, she remained connected to them, her heartbeat a steady rhythm of protection and devotion. She had faced the inevitable with courage and love, had sung her final lullaby, and had given them every ounce of care she could muster. And in that quiet, tender moment, the bond between her and the hatchlings shone brighter than any fear, any uncertainty, or any shadow that lingered outside. It was a bond of love, of trust, and of life, a bond that would endure beyond words, beyond time, and beyond any challenge the world could bring. The morning light returned slowly to the valley, washing the hills and trees in soft gold. The haze from the smoke had begun to lift, leaving behind a quiet calm that felt almost fragile after the long night. She did not awaken immediately, her body still curled among the hatchlings, their tiny warm bodies pressed against her in a last comforting embrace. There was a stillness in the air that seemed almost reverent, as if the world itself paused to honor the bond they had shared. The hatchlings stirred softly, stretching tiny wings and nudging one another, their trust in her unwavering despite the long night of fear and uncertainty. She opened her eyes slowly, taking in the sight of them. Their scales glinted in the morning light golden green, fiery red, and deep black, and her heart swelled with love and pride. Each one had survived the night, had felt her protection, and had grown stronger because of her care. She smiled faintly, brushing a hand across the golden-green hatchling's head and feeling its tiny heartbeat under her fingers. Though exhaustion weighed heavily on her, there was a sense of peace that had not existed the day before. They were alive and they were together, and that was everything. As the hatchlings began to explore the small cave. Testing their wings and moving cautiously toward the entrance, she stayed close, guiding them gently. She let them feel the freedom of movement, the joy of discovery, even in this small, protected space. The fiery red hatchling flapped its wings proudly, chirping in delight, while the shy black one crept forward, hesitantly stepping into the light before retreating back into her protective arms. She whispered softly, encouraging the shy one, praising the brave ones, and letting each feel the warmth of her love. "You are strong," she said. "You have everything you need inside you." The valley outside was quiet now, but it bore the marks of the long struggle. Small patches of ash dotted the grass, and the wind carried a faint scent of smoke that reminded her of the danger they had faced. Yet, despite the scars, life persisted. Tiny insects moved cautiously along the ground. Leaves fluttered gently in the breeze, and birds returned to the trees, their soft calls filling the air. She took a deep breath, letting the freshness of the morning fill her lungs, and felt hope rise again. The valley had endured, and now so had her hatchlings. She led the hatchlings outside carefully, letting them feel the soft warmth of the sunlight on their scales and the texture of the grass beneath their claws. They moved slowly at first, testing the world, but quickly gained confidence as they realized it was safe. The golden-green hatchling bounded ahead, exploring every small rock and patch of earth, while the fiery red one flapped its wings with pride, chirping excitedly as it discovered new scents and sounds. Even the night-black hatchling stepped out cautiously, guided by her gentle encouragement, and soon found the courage to explore beside the others. Watching them, she felt a sense of fulfillment that words could not capture, a quiet pride in the resilience and courage she had helped nurture. She spent the day with them, letting them play, discover, and learn. She pointed out small streams where they could drink safely, soft patches of moss where they could rest, and hidden nooks that offered shade. Every movement she made was careful, yet encouraging, giving them the freedom to grow while ensuring they felt her constant presence. The hatchlings responded with joyful chirps and tiny playful movements, their trust in her evident in every step, every flutter of wings, and every gentle nudge. She laughed softly as the golden green one tumbled over a rock, as the fiery red one chased a butterfly, and as the night black one attempted to mimic the other's playful antics. These small joys reminded her that even after fear and danger, life could be full of wonder, discovery, and love. Throughout the day, she reflected on all that had happened. The nights of uncertainty, the long hours of preparation, and the moments of fear had been challenging, but they had also revealed the depth of her connection with these creatures. She realized that her love had not only protected them, but had also strengthened them. They had learned courage, trust, and resilience not through force, but through her care, her attention, and the unwavering presence of her heart. Even in moments when she had doubted herself, the bond they shared had guided them through doubt. As evening approached, she gathered the hatchlings together once more. They nestled close, their bodies warm and trusting. She stroked their scales and whispered softly to each of them, recounting small memories of their journey together, the first tentative steps, the early attempts to flap wings, the moments of play, and the songs she had sung to soothe them. She let each memory linger in the quiet air, knowing that these recollections would live on in them, shaping their spirits and giving them comfort long after they had grown dot. She thought about the future she had once imagined for them, a future of exploration, of soaring through the skies, and of finding joy in the vast valley that stretched beyond the cave. And she realized that this future was still possible. Even though the danger had come close, it had not defeated them. They were alive, they were strong, and they had the lessons of love, courage, and trust she had taught them. Her heart swelled with a quiet pride as she watched them settle down for the night, curling together in a circle that reflected both their closeness and their confidence. Night fell over the valley once more, but this time it was gentle, calm, and filled with a sense of safety. She remained with the hatchlings until they slept, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each breath, their wings folding neatly against their sides. She hummed softly, a familiar tune, letting it carry through the quiet cave. Even as the lullaby faded, the bond she had nurtured remained strong, a living connection that would continue to guide and protect them. Finally, she allowed herself to rest. Her hands lingered on their small forms, feeling their warmth and comfort. She reflected on the journey, the early days of care, the nights of fear, the moments of joy, and the lessons learned. She realized that the love she had given was not fleeting, but eternal in its impact. It had strengthened them, shaped them, and would continue to guide them as they grew. Her heart was full of gratitude for the time they had shared, for the trust they had placed in her, and for the resilience they had shown. The valley, too, seemed to recognize this quiet triumph. The smoke had cleared, the sun shone brightly over the hills, and the world seemed to breathe again with life and hope. She watched the hatchlings as they slept, feeling the gentle rhythm of their breathing, the warmth of their tiny bodies, and the undeniable bond that tied them together. Even as challenges lay ahead, she knew that they were ready. Her guidance, her love, and her care had prepared them to face whatever might come. And that knowledge filled her with peace. As dawn approached the next day, the hatchlings began to stir, eager to explore again. She guided them outside, letting them feel the grass under their claws and the sunlight on their scales. They played, flapped their wings, and discovered new corners of the valley, their confidence growing with each step. She observed them with quiet pride, knowing that her efforts had borne fruit. They were strong, capable, and filled with the lessons she had taught them: courage, love, and trust. Even as the day passed, she remained close, watching, guiding, and nurturing. She understood that her time with them, though it might one day change, had created a foundation they could always return to, a source of comfort, strength, and love. Every chirp, every flutter of wings, every playful nudge was a reminder of the bond they shared. A bond that would continue to grow even as they explored the world beyond the cave. As the sun began to set, painting the valley in shades of gold and pink, she allowed herself one final moment of reflection. The hatchlings were safe, they were thriving, and they had everything they needed to face the future. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had given them her all, that she had loved them completely, and that she had prepared them for the journey of life ahead. Even if she was no longer physically present for every adventure, the lessons she had taught and the love she had shared would remain with them forever. The night settled over the valley with a gentle calm. She sat among the hatchlings, her heart full, her mind at peace. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and the weight of responsibility, and through it all, she had given the greatest gift she could offer, love. And that love would endure, a quiet strength that would guide the hatchlings as they grew, explored, and discovered the world. The bond they shared would live on, eternal and unbroken, a legacy of care, courage, and unwavering devotion.